Hello everyone, we are Team 12 and we are going to present our project for this class, which is TAT, Test Time Adaptation on Transformer-Based Models. This is the outline for our presentation. Today, transformer-based foundation models such as GPT-3 or CLIP are achieving a higher accuracy rate compared to CNN or RNN models. However, they use a huge number of parameters to achieve such accuracy. For example, the biggest GPT-3 model uses 175 billion parameters to predict results. Training this kind of model takes a tremendous amount of time, so it is almost impossible to retrain whole models on downstream tasks. Also, in real-world applications, many models suffer from domain shift. Domain shift is a difference of distribution between the source, which will be the training data, and the target, which will be the test data. This usually affects the model in a bad way. For example, let's think of a model which was trained with accelerometer data gathered from young people. When we use this model after deployment and test this using the data from elderly people, the accuracy will drastically decrease. To solve this problem, various domain adaptation methods have been proposed. Methods such as unsupervised domain adaptation, meta-learning, continual learning, and memory replay techniques were proposed. Many of them contributed to gain accuracy to the target data. Test time adaptation is one of the popular methods for domain adaptation. Test time adaptation trying to update the model during the testing model. It is a more practical way against other methods because the real-world model has several challenges. Thus, TTA trying to adapt while continuous adaptation, unsupervised manner, and no source data needed. This approach has quite a vision to solve the practical problems, which makes people pay attention to this model. However, because of realistic settings, there are many parts to improve yet. We believe that TTA setting is more important for foundation models than any other types of AI models, because all of its settings are a direct requirement for deploying these layer norm-based models in the real world. Since these large-sized models are too big and costly to be updated every single time, a single model is prone to be used for a long period of time, requiring continuous adaptation. Furthermore, most of the data visible in the real world aren't labeled data, but unlabeled, noisy data, adding the need for it to be able to adapt in an unsupervised manner. Lastly, source data for these models are too large to be fit in mobile devices, even normal computers. Thus, when deployed, the model is on its own, adapting to test data without looking back at its source data. Thus, we envision bringing the test time adaptation setting to these large-size transformer-based foundation models. So what were the previous approaches taken on this matter? It is extremely interesting that domain adaptation on foundation models and test time adaptation has been developed in a parallel manner, meaning that they weren't considered jointly before. To take a brief overview of each development, with the rise of foundation models and due to their arduous training procedure, many researchers have delved into finding efficient training methods to adapt these models to downstream tasks. These were various approaches to this. There were various approaches to this, ranging from naive fine-tuning just like in vision domains to usage of adapters, a simple encoder-decoder block inserted between models for training. Then came the most recent and advanced prompt tuning-based methods. We will discuss this further in our method formulation part, but it has a critical limitation, just like its previous works, that it is fixed during deployment and cannot adapt continuously and requires ground truth labels during the training process. For the test time adaptation field, many works have been done in utilizing the batch normalization layer of the models. We will discuss this further in later slides as well, but they also have a critical limitation in terms that these large-size foundation models actually do not have a batch normalization layer to train. Now, I hope you get a grasp on why we said these two fields were developed in parallel, which is why test time adaptation on transformer-based model is such a timely yet important topic to discuss at the moment, envisioning on online unsupervised domain adaptation with transformer-based models. We have summarized the limitation of current approaches in this slide. Test time adaptation methods like TAT utilizes the batch normalization layer for training, which is missing in most transformer-based models. And those methods like Kota and Lame, who do not use batch normalization layers, face a generalizability issue. It cannot be applied to tasks other than classification. In domain adaptation and transformers, all of the methods rely heavily on labeled data, which is extremely unrealistic in real-world applications where acquiring labeled data requires additional overhead on the user side, undermining user experience. Also, they cannot do continuous adaptation without user effort, constantly querying the user for guidance.
We currently have two main approaches to tackle the issues and challenges of previous works. The first one is to utilize the layer normalization layer within the models. And second is to do an online unsupervised version of prompt tuning. The main intuition of training the BN statistics in test time adaptation was because the statistics were biased to the training data, yet extremely easy to train with unlabeled data. Batch normalization layers normalize the input vectors with pre-trained mean and variance during training. The drawback to this is that these mean and variance statistics vary significantly between domains. For example, mean and variance of cartoon images vary greatly from mean and variance of pictures. Thus, many TTA methods were tried to update this mean and variance on the fly with upcoming test samples. And training only the batch normalization statistics with freezing the rest of the parameters. This is extremely efficient since BN parameters only take up a small portion of the whole model. But with updating them, we can achieve comparable accuracy to other DA methods. But this cannot be directly applicable to transformer-based models because they do not have batch normalization layers. So our current approach is to update the layer normalization layers within transformers model instead, and update them in a manner that fully utilizes the characteristics of layer normalization, which is a completely different architecture from batch normalization. Although we haven't devised a concrete method yet, our preliminary experiments with BART and fine food data set implies that we can achieve 3% of more accuracy gains with naively updating the LN layer, a 1% increase compared to current SOTA approaches. Our second approach is to use a fancy technique called prompt tuning, which is grabbing attention from many researchers around the world. To briefly explain, we need some context on what the prompt is. Nowadays, most language models express huge generalizability from as knowledge learned from enormous amounts of training data. Thus, to fully utilize them with the start of the GPT paper, these models have added prepending vocabulary in front of the input text to prod or evoke corresponding knowledge of that domain. For example, for a sentiment classification task where an input is no reason to watch, and the task is to predict whether the given prompt is positive or negative in sentiment. The modified input would be blank, no reason to watch. The model would fill in the blanks with a vocabulary with highest probability, and mapping that vocabulary to a specific sentiment, say negative or terrible. We can get the wanted output What this new approach does is change the given template of the input task as such. No reason to watch it was blank. What's amazing is that even with such slight changes, the model responds and has significant accuracy gains in downstream tasks, even comparable to fully fine-tuning on the test data. However, the current limitation to this is that, as discussed before, that it is done in a supervised manner and requires labels. Furthermore, it is fixed during deployment and unable to adapt to changing test streams of data. We would like to tackle this limitation and take it a step further. For detailed information, please refer to the Microsoft seminar on YouTube. Now I will explain our team contributions and the timeline for the project. Taewa Kim, our team leader, contributes for baseline implementation and ID formulation. Hyunsuk Lee contributes for language domain baseline implementation. Kanghyuk Lee contributes for vision domain baseline implementation. Jaeung An contributes related work search and dataset pre-processing. This is our upcoming timeline, and this timeline can be flexible with our schedule. Until now, we concentrated on related work study and reproducing their work on our own. For example, prompt tuning, prefix tuning, and BN-based TTA methods. From now on, we will develop methodologies which we suggested in before slides. Prompt-based TTA and layer node-based TTA. Thank you for listening.